Hey there guys, Noah here, and welcome back to another deck profile. Today, I'm going to be showcasing you guys my new updated list from God knows how long that I did that initial deck profile, and if it's terrible, do not watch it. I'll probably end up deleting it at some point. If I don't, oh well. But I'm going to be showcasing Raging Form Dragon in its full glory. Now, I want to give a big shout out to Crow, who initially made this list, because without him, I would have never been able to figure this out on my own, to be honest. He took this and actually came top 16 at the last Kingslayer event, so yeah. There are a few minor adjustments in the G-Zone that, you know, for my own personal preference, I decided to make. Mostly because I didn't feel like paying an additional $40 for the Raging Form Stride for 2 copies. It just, to me, it wasn't worth it when the new Stride provides so much utility overall. So that being said, let's get into the deck profile. That being said, there will be gameplay showcasing the deck in action after the deck profile portion of the video. If you guys enjoy this kind of content, then hit a like and consider subscribing, because any bit of support is greatly appreciated. Without further ado, let's jump into the deck profile. Starting off with the starter, any of the V-Series starters, you want to run it because Quick Shield is great. For the trigger lineup, we're running 11 crit, 4 of them being Belial Owl and the Stride Fodder, as well as the 3 Grim Revengers. Now, I will say that there are some lists that run the draw PGs, but I find that they are very not necessary, especially with the new G-Guard. A lot of the times you're actually more prone to decking out that way, so I just find it, especially if you end up drawing into your Overtrigger, which we're running Amartanoa, yeah, it's kind of a feels bad. So, speaking of which, Amartanoa, in the gameplay, you'll see that I ran the vanilla Overtrigger for the longest time, but I ultimately recently made the change to swap to Amartanoa because more drive checks on the rears, especially on a huge push turn, is very good. It means more cards in hand, which means you can just really do more shenanigans that way. And of course, we're running the 4 Heal Guards because Heal Guards are honestly really good. Up next for the Grade 3 lineup, we're running 4 Raging Form. Your main ride target, always going to be the one Grade 3 you want to ride immediately out the gate. He's got really good effects. Definitely one of the better boss units for Shadow Paladin at the moment. We're running 2 copies of Slay Hacks, which basically allow you to Superior Ride Raging Form from the deck. So basically you have 6 copies of the same card. So the odds of you whiffing and missing and having to ride Raging Fall on Grade 3 turn, extremely low. And then, of course, we're running 3 copies of Raging Fall. A lot of people try to run the Abyss Legion, but in a metagame that's extremely prone now to board removal mid-battle phase, I don't see a point, especially when you're negging so hard just to get the effect off. Even if you put cards back, like your Overtrigger back, it's just not worth it to me. Up next for the Grade 2s, we're running 4 copies of Lily Revenger Mana, the originals. She is as free as they fucking get. When placed on Van or rear, call a Revenger to the rear guard, and then at the end of the turn, you send it to the bottom of the deck. Very useful. Grade 1 Revenger, by the way. Running 4 copies of Tartu. Tartu is not as free, but still pretty good. Your premier Grade 2 target a lot of the times, because she'll allow you for a Soul Blast when placed from hand to search for a Grade 1 or less Revenger and call it to the rear guard. And then at the end of the turn, the unit called gets retired. She is really a good searcher. Probably honestly, the second most free searcher in the deck outside of mana. Very useful. And then lastly, for our Grade 2s, we were running 4 copies of Dark Bless Angel. Dark Bless is basically your main combo extender, which basically allows you for a Counterblast when she's retired to call a Grade 1 Revenger, and then at the end of the turn, that card gets retired. Very useful for prolonging multiple Raging Forms before ending on a Raging Fall. And honestly, even if you're comboing her off of certain strides, very useful card. I would never take her out. Up next, for the Grade 1s, we're running 4 copies of Rakia. Rakia is honestly your main ride target going in any situation. When he's in the soul, and once you ride from a Grade 2 onto a Grade 3, you can search your deck for a Grade 1 or lower Revenger and call it out. So, very useful. And then he has another skill which allows him to, for a cost of a Soul Blast 2, call a Grade 2 from the drop zone in the same column as it. Very useful. Overall, your main ride target going in any given situation. Up next, 2 copies of Mar. He's really the main card you're going to be searching out for off of the Rakia, because he allows you to search for the same name as your Vanguard once you hit grade 3 for a Counterblast 1, specifically with Revenger. So keep that in mind. It has to be with a Revenger. Can't be your heals, your other crits that isn't the Grim Revenger. Up next, 2 copies of Alfie, your main other version of Raging Form searching in the early game. She also is very useful on the early to mid game, where you need to hit certain magic numbers to force more shield out of the opponent's hand, because if you whiff the Raging Form search, she can give plus 2k to a rearguard if you're choosing, or I think it's unit of your choosing. But honestly, still very good. Combos very well with mana if you're going first, because you'll do mana into any card, and then you call Alfie's skill if you whiff. Instead of just the 16, which is easily guardable by 10k shield, now it becomes 18k, requiring 15k or more. And then lastly, 4 copies of Rinnel. Rinnel is your main searcher in this deck. The one search target you're always going to do off of the Tartu and Manas. When he hits, or whenever he boosts a successful attack, look at the top 3 for a Revenger, add it to the hand, and put the rest at the bottom of the deck in any order. Very useful searcher. And then he also has a really good secondary effect, which reads, when he's retired, Soul Last 1, and it forces your opponent to choose one of their own rearguards and kill them. So honestly, very useful, very overall good cards. And honestly, this deck is just crazy with the amount of searching and, just draw power it's going to do. Honestly, you can blow people out of the water with this. Moving on to the G-Zone, we're going to start off with the 3 Chain Rankers. Probably your best stride in the deck, simply because they can copy the Vanguard skill, so it allows you to combo with all your other pieces. Very useful card. It also has a really strong GB3 guard restrict, so definitely, can blow your opponent out of the water sometimes. There are some situations where a 15 card hand suddenly becomes 6 because of this card, so honestly, very useful. Definitely would not trade it for the world. 2 copies of Drag Principal Morfessa, because she does sometimes come up. 2 copies of Crunch. This was primarily the reason why I didn't decide to run the Raging Rap Dragon, simply because a lot of the time, if you're not striding with Chainranker, you're going to go into this guy because your opponent didn't give you enough rearguards to retire. And even sometimes this stride is still very good, but just to sack pretty much your opponent's whole board, because you could combo this off of Rinnel and force them to retire even more. So honestly, just overall very useful card. It also helps that it doesn't lose drive checks, so while it is a little hard to pull off at times depending on the matchup, I still find it overall more useful than Dispatchal Blaster Diablo. And speaking of Diablos, we're running 2 copies of Phantom Blaster Diablo. Sometimes if your opponent doesn't have a G-Guard in hand, and they don't give you enough rear guards, and they don't respect the option, this stride just kills them. Especially if they're at 4 damage, then it's just you go swing with a crit, Oonga Boonga, retire, and just go, well, guess I'm dead now. So definitely this card is absolutely amazing. I honestly, as a Shadow Paladin main, I would never take this out because it's honestly that good. And lastly, for our 2 situational attacks in the G-Zone, one of them's attack, the other one is just legitimately flip fodder. So first up is the flip fodder, is Harmonix Messiah. I did it for the memes, but also because I pulled it and I just wanted to throw it in there. This, if I had to change the deck list, would be Storm Element Cyclone. Just in those instances where I have to call Grim Revenger, and because it's vanilla, it would get powered up, and so on and so forth. Yeah. And then we're running the 1 copy of Agnos in the weird situation where it comes down to it, and I feel like I need more cards in hand to survive a turn. And I just legit have nothing in hand outside of what is basically an ultimate stride cost. This card just sometimes comes up. Really, you're only doing it if, in the off chance you need to stall for a turn and not give your opponent counterblast, and you can just punish the opponent this way a bit. But by that point, why are you not going into Chainranker at that point? There are situations that this could potentially come up, and I just decided to throw it in there because really there may be a situation in the future that it does come up. And lastly, for our G guards, we're running 2 copies of Plot Maker. Honestly, just generically a really good G guard. 2 copies of Debriefer, the best G guard by a lot of standards because of how free this is in the deck. You would think, though, considering deck isn't like Luard and it doesn't entirely focus on grade 1s, that Debriefer wouldn't be as useful. But there's still a lot of the times where this card just comes up and just sits there and says, hi, I'm just going to do this really wonky play, and just, especially against DP, where their new stride gets really big, and you could just sit there and do this and deny them even if they use Linka. Like, honestly, it's amazing. And lastly, Gelido, 1 copy of Gelido. There are situations where you'll have 2 grade 1s in the front row, specifically on turns where you ended off of on the Raging Fall and you want to use this. So yeah, honestly, she still is useful. Maybe not as much as she used to be, but honestly still worthy to throw into the deck. And with that being said, that is the deck list. Now there's going to be some gameplay showcasing the deck in action. If you enjoyed this deck profile, let me know in the comments. And till next time, this is DRAGNOA, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye. guys.